Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. I have Chief Huskey from Sandy PD in Oregon. He has over 25 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Huskey. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Paige.
Yeah, of course. So I'm looking forward to our conversation. There are a few things that you told me offline that I didn't know. So I've already learned some things from you that I thought were really interesting, and I'm excited to share that with our listeners. I know you started in 1998 as a seasonal cadet, and I was hoping that maybe you can give us some insight into how you got started with that and what led you to be in the chief position that you're in today.
Yeah, I knew a bunch of people growing up that were involved with the Oregon State Police. A lot of them were close family friends, and I learned about the program through them.
Mm.
It's a program that they no longer have, which is good and bad. You got to take it for what it's worth. But at that time, it was a great tool to recruit young people into law enforcement. And I was lucky enough to get in at the very last minute in 1998 as an alternate. Um, and I worked 2 seasons as a seasonal cadet during summers. And that's, kind of what got me through college and got my foot in the door for eventually a career at the Oregon State Police.
Mm. I'm really always curious if there was one thing where you were like, that's what I like, that is why I want to be in law enforcement. Like, was there one specific detail about the job that just hooked you?
I growing up, I knew about the time I hit high school that I wanted to be in law enforcement, and I think what really me to law enforcement was being able to do different things,
Yeah.
and not really sitting behind a desk didn't interest me at that time at all. Of course, fast forward till now, and I do a lot of sitting behind a desk. But it was really the opportunity to help people and just do different things and just stay busy. I think is what really attracted me to it.
Yeah, the variety of exciting things that are happening, you kind of don't know what each
You
day is going to hold.
you definitely don't know what your day's going to hold. You can go to work thinking you have a list of things or projects or activities you want to get accomplished, and things take a complete twist in a
Yeah.
second, and you're doing something else. So that's definitely an attraction.
Yeah, I love it. And I used to work in a corporate setting where, to your point, like I sat behind the desk and it was like Groundhog's Day. It was the same thing every day, and so I can relate to that of wanting to have some variety and some excitement and things being a little bit different. I know that when we talked offline, you made a comment to me about how agencies do a really good job of training officers to handle incidents and situations, but maybe not a great job in training the aftermath emotionally and how to handle with things after the fact. What experience did you have with that throughout your career?
Well, I think I was fortunate enough early on in my career. 2008, I got a spot on our drug enforcement team, and here in Oregon, I think it was our drug enforcement partners and leadership through the Oregon Narcotics Enforcement Association that I think realized that. I think they were one of the first people to realize that in Oregon, and they started bringing instructors into our annual conference. And that was a good time for me because it is about that 7 to 8 year mark for most police officers where they've probably learned about everything they're going to learn, and now they're just honing their skill sets. So I think it's easy to get bored at that point in your law enforcement career.
Yeah.
So there were things that some of those instructors said in training that just got me to thinking. Kevin Gilmartin was one of those that's always comes to memory for me. And he talked about, that disgruntled old officer that is cynical and negative, and they can sit in training and, any new ideas that come their way, they're just going to say, well, that's never going to work. And not give anybody a chance to teach them anything new. Um, That was a pretty pivotal time for me because I think I was at that juncture in my career where I could have gone either way. I could have gone, towards that disgruntled senior trooper, senior officer, senior deputy that, was nobody could tell them any different. Or you could go down the other path, which was to continue to learn and hone your skills and then help mentor people coming behind you.
Do you think that that is maybe the typical response is to shove things down, to harden, to shut down and to have more of that negative mindset? Do you think that that's what most people do if you don't have the right exposure to education or resources like you did with Kevin Gilmartin?
I think so. I think a lot of the statistics show with our wellness training that we're able to get now that 80% of our thoughts are negative. And
Mm.
when I first heard that, it was a shock to me. I've always been the kind of person that tends to focus on the positive no matter what kind of hand you're dealt. And so I remember hearing that in training and thinking how shocking it was to me. But then as they go on to continue and talk about that negative mindset, and then I think you and I Googled earlier that that's true, but 95% of those thoughts uh, are repetitive thoughts. And that really makes a lot of sense because there's always things that trigger you to think about negative things. And the important thing that I got out of that training was you have to train your mind to get out of that negative mindset.
Yeah.
And I think you're more successful people in law enforcement, in fire, in medical response, medical field, military for that. Those people that see trauma on a daily basis, if you aren't able to train yourself out of that negative mindset and what you're seeing, that's going to be a really long career and probably lead down that road to um, post traumatic stress disorder, um, you know, getting hooked on pills, getting hooked on booze, trying to cope with those negative thoughts that end up haunting you forever.
Yeah. No, I agree with you that a positive mindset and a positive mental attitude is so important. And I know that you said that you always kind of had that, like that was maybe inherently who you are, but do you know any strategies for training your mind to get out of that negative mental loop and into more of a positive mindset?
Something that it works for me, and I couldn't tell you kind of where I got it. I don't know if it was something that just got brought up with me with my parents, but you know, you, I wouldn't say we were poor growing up, but we definitely weren't rich. So when you needed to accomplish something, you just found a way to do it.
Mm,
And that could be just looking around you and trying to find a tool in the garage that maybe you don't have. But if you put your mind to it and find out, hey, I can probably do that with this other tool. So I find myself doing that, throughout my life to this day. Um, Thinking about, okay, I don't have what I need right now. What else do I have that
mm,
can get me there? And so, anytime I've ever been presented with a problem, whether it's work, life,
mm,
if I can't solve it right, then I just kind of take a step back and think, okay, well, I know what I need to get to. I know what I want my outcome to be. How am I going to get there with what I have at this moment? And maybe it's not today. Maybe I have to wait till tomorrow
yeah.
or next week because something will change in that time frame. Um, and I've just kind of learned how to apply that in most scenarios.
Yeah, I really like that. So you're using maybe something that's challenging or negative in your life as an opportunity to grow, and you're taking kind of a problem solver mentality of like, okay, this is really hard or this isn't working. What can I do to change the situation to where it is more positive and more productive? I really like that. And that was a great response. Some other things I think, for anyone who's listening that have helped me too is one, I think gratitude. If you can start training your brain, because again, if most of your thoughts are repetitive and they're well, let me backtrack. If most of them are negative, then how can we start introducing some more positive reinforcement, right? So how can we start saying, okay, these are the things that are good in my life.
Mhm.
But then to the point that if your thoughts are repetitive, then you could train your thoughts to be repetitive in a positive way, right?
I
And
believe so.
so I think that I know that some things border on the woo-woo side, so bear with me here, but there's actually so much science to support gratitude. And so what I try to do every morning, and I try to do it when I'm in the shower. It's a routine that I have when I'm in the shower. It's not something that you have to carve out extra time to do. You're already there washing your hair or whatever you need to do that day. But I try to do 3 to 5 things that I'm grateful for. And maybe you're grateful for the same things every day, and maybe they change. And I had one guest that was on here, and he said, because he was talking about how he was in a really dark, dark space, to the point of making a plan, devising a plan to take his life. And he had to construct gratitude artificially for himself because he couldn't see anything that he was grateful for. And so, what he did, and I thought this was also a great strategy, and anyone who's listening who might be in a position where it's like really dark and really tough, and you just can't think of anything that you're grateful for, he would buy himself flowers and he would look at the flowers and he'd be like, okay, I'm grateful for the smell of these flowers. I'm grateful for the color. I'm grateful, um, for one that's starting to bloom. And he was kind of describing where he would just sit down and he would look at these flowers and he would force himself to come up with 3 things that he was grateful for in that moment. And I think that's a really good step to start training your brain to look for the positives. It's almost like the red car theory. Have you heard this before?
No, I don't think so.
So if you're out driving, like you might not notice cars when you're driving, right? But then if you're like, I'm going to look for red cars, now all of a sudden you see red cars everywhere,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think if you start to train your brain to look for good things, you're going to start to notice more good things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that sounds like, that person was like you said, at the bottom and needed to find just that one thing. And the fact that they could buy themselves flowers so that they could see and smell the colors and the fragrance from those flowers, that would be a really good tactic.
Yeah, it was something I had never considered before. I think we all have our own perspectives in life, and I was like, yeah, just gratitude, right? Like, just do it in the shower. And he's like, but what if you really can't? Like, what if you really can't find something that you're grateful for? What do you do? And so for him to give that perspective, I thought that was really powerful. And it's something that I think is really beneficial for anyone, like you said, who's maybe at their bottom and needs something. And maybe you do have to artificially find something for a little bit until you can start to find things on your own.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that you are in the process of building a multidimensional wellness program that includes a lot of different things. And I was hoping you could maybe give some insights into some of the things that you're trying to develop. Where do you start when you're building out a wellness program? Because, you know, to your point of what you said earlier, like you want to be inclusive of everyone and you want to support the wellness of your people. And a lot of people I talk to in leadership maybe don't know where to start or what to do. So if you could give some insights into things that you're doing, I think that'd be really helpful.
Sure. Yeah. So, it's almost a year now that I've been with Sandy, and coming from a larger agency as Oregon State Police, uh, I had the opportunity to be on the wellness team with them. But we had such a large agency that we had 70 people on that roster, and those people ranged from non-sworn staff in multiple different positions, dispatch, records, um, human resources components folks, program support folks, all the way up to, officers, troopers, sergeants, lieutenants, and I think we had a captain on there. The uh, the good thing about that is each one of those people on that roster had come from a different discipline, whether it was patrol services or criminal investigations, uh, SWAT folks, mobile response team folks that had riot experience, um, drug enforcement individuals. So you could almost, as a somebody that needed those resources, just literally go down the list and shop for somebody that had similar experience to you. So in your larger agencies, I would say that you really need to make sure that you're building, a large toolbox for these people to look at and go, well, I can call that person.
Yeah.
Uh, I I was a lieutenant when I was on that team, and I found myself receiving phone calls from other supervisors
Mhm.
because they were dealing with supervisory level things that they were just trying to wrap their head around and deal with and come up with solutions. So that was good that they had somebody of similar rank to reach out to.
Yeah.
And, you know, fast forward to where I am here today with a much smaller agency. Um, it's hard with a small agency to start a wellness team because you really want to have those people that were within your agency on that team. And you may not have that depth that you once had with a large agency. So we have had to start basically from the ground up.
Mhm.
So I mean, I did the best I could in the very beginning. I identified a non-sworn person, I identified a sergeant, and an officer, all of whom had interest in being part of that wellness team. Also, being people that the rest of the agency members trusted to confide in. That's super important. You got to make sure that you have people that they're just going to be trusted if you reach out to them. Um, but also, don't be afraid to reach out to your local partners. We're pretty in the area I'm in Clackamas County in Oregon. Also with Multnomah County close by, there's a lot of agencies, a lot of people that we can lean on, a lot of chaplains in the area to lean on, and basically utilize all of their existing resources to help you. Um, so we're, like I said, we're still in the beginning of it, but we're doing more and getting more. And just building that list of folks that you can reach out to and contact. And I mean, now I'm considering you one of my, contacts, for that team. So, the next step for us is kind of building a list of resources and putting those people on that. Hey, I know somebody that does, wellness, yoga, um, try to find those key people so that when somebody says, hey, I need help and I want to try this, you always have that list of resources that you can send them to. And so that's kind of where we're at now, as a small agency, um, trying to build that team up.
I think through my own experience, I've started to recognize that there are people who know what they're doing and there are people who have done it better. And like, I think sometimes, I mean, I'm super guilty of this where I'm like, what do I do? I don't know what to do, and then I think if you can zoom out a little bit and look at, the fact that there are people around you that maybe have the answer and, maybe have built out a wellness program, or maybe there's a specific resource that you're looking for. Like maybe you're trying to add, like you said, maybe a peer support team or any other facet of wellness. And there's maybe people around you who have done it and who know. So, I would challenge anyone who's maybe trying to start a wellness program to reach out to individuals like yourself who like have that knowledge and have that experience, and you guys can share ideas with each other because I think we're stronger together, but I think sometimes we forget that we have each other.
Oh, most definitely.
What are some of the things, like if you were to just take a look at a robust wellness program and maybe it's like in a perfect world, what do you think that would look like? What pillars or modalities do you think are really important to have if resources and funding wasn't a challenge? What do you think would be the most important things to put in place?
I think you always have to have that physical fitness component.
Yeah.
to your program because studies have shown over and over and over again, if we don't stay physically fit, the mind goes next, right? So having something there, and if you can have a small fitness room in your police department where they can take 30 minutes and just jump on a treadmill
Mhm.
and just walk, run, um, an exercise bike, anything that just gets their blood moving a little bit. Um, our department started a couple of years ago, I think, with an hour of wellness time during their shift. Our officers work 12, so they're on a Pittman 12 uh, schedule. So, I can see the difference in the folks that take advantage of just stepping offline, and they'll take their LBV off, and they put their radio in the corner, and they just jump on the treadmill, and they just take off, and they
Yeah.
walk for so many minutes. Um, or, the good thing about being a city police department is you probably have parks in your city,
Mm.
and the ability to just check out at a park and just walk around the park and talk to people is a huge benefit.
Yeah.
Uh, it's like right now it's the beginning of summer. So what better time of the year to start putting some miles on and just walk around your parks and talk to people? That's going to be healthy. Um, Next to that physical component of your wellness team, you have to have that emotional support because people just need to be able to call somebody and just vent. And
Yeah.
um, I think that's I think that's probably one of the things that gets utilized the most, based off my experience, is just that ability to just call somebody and say, "Hey, I'm dealing with this. Have you dealt with it before?" And maybe share concepts or ideas, much like we're doing right now. I think that's just probably your biggest thing. If you can get that going, I think the rest of the stuff will end up falling into place.
Yeah.
Um, Chaplains are key. Um, some people respond better to that religious component of our wellness programs because their faith carries them through in a
Mhm.
lot of situations. Um, if you have a church and you're part of that church, I see a lot of benefit to those friends and families that I've, you know, that that's super important to them, and without it, uh, they don't do as well in life. So if that's what you need, then go find that.
Yeah.
Um, Chaplains, I've found, I've had the honor of meeting a lot of our chaplains here in Oregon over the years, and that's just a phenomenal group of people that just want to help you. And I would say don't be afraid to talk to a chaplain, even if you're not a religious person,
Yeah.
because they're not there to cram their ideas down your throat. They're there to help you. Um, so I would encourage a lot of our folks to, go talk to a chaplain, even if you're not a religious person. They have a skill set and ability to just sit down and talk to folks, and it's very worthwhile if you ever take that time and talk to those folks. Um, but I think those are your key components of wellness that you really have to try and design into your programs.
Yeah. I want to touch on a couple of those things that you said. So, one, I'm like laughing to myself because you're like, yeah, it's summer. It's so nice, walk around. And I'm sitting here in Phoenix and it's 115 degrees already. And I'm like, speak for yourself. Like, way to rub it in, you know? But
Uh-huh.
I agree with you. I think that sometimes it's just having a moment to just move and like shift your thought process a little bit. And physical wellness to me is really, really important. I think that there's obvious reasons why being fit in this profession is important for safety and the functions of your career. But I also just think from a mental perspective, I've never, I've never left doing something physical feeling more stressed. I've always felt less stressed. I've always felt like it's an opportunity to just clear your mind, and I always feel more resilient afterwards too. Like I just feel like, man, like I was able to like get myself out of a negative headspace and into a more positive one. And to me, that's more resiliency, like be able to come back to baseline. Or physically, I was able to do something really, really hard and it sucked, but like I was able to do it. So now I know I can do hard things. So I agree with you. I think that's going to look different for everybody. Maybe it's going out and walking. Maybe it's getting on the treadmill or the bike. Maybe it's going and doing a hit training or CrossFit or jujitsu, or, it could look so different for everybody. But I do agree that a physical component is really important. And then the the ability to talk to people, I think, is starting to come around. I think people are starting to be more receptive to this. I could never understand why, and you said this earlier, and we talked about unhealthy coping mechanisms, but I could never understand why talking about things and choosing healthier coping mechanisms is viewed as weakness. Um, because I think that it's incredibly strong and courageous to ask for help or to process those really hard things. It's so much easier to go and get drunk at night than to like
Yeah.
talk to someone about it and like actually deal with it. But I feel like the script has been so flipped for so long that we're starting to see that turnover a little bit. And I hope that will continue that momentum because I do think it's so strong and courageous to like grow, like to deal with it and then to grow and be a better person. Like to me, that's strength. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I agree with you on a lot of those things, all of those things.
Yeah. I think I still think there's a large component of folks out there, especially the older generation of law enforcement, that still think this might be a fad wellness, coming up in our first responder worlds. Um, but it's not. It's, you know, I, our macho attitude can only get us so far. And I think those folks that have buried those emotions over the years are the ones that, hopefully can look back on their careers and realize, you know what, I buried those emotions for far too long and they're still bothering me. And I've had friends over the years that were not able to cope with the things, the daily stresses of the job that, um, have either committed suicide or have sought psychological help and realized, oh, these things really were bothering me, and are now off. They're better off for having exposed those old wounds. Um, and it's okay for those of us in leadership positions to show vulnerability once in a while
Yeah.
and show that those things do affect us. So if you're on a fatality scene and dead bodies, it's okay to let your folks know that this is this is not a normal scene. These things affect us, and to talk about those and debrief those after the fact are really important, um, because I had an opportunity here. It's been a couple of years now, but we had 6 fatalities in a very short time frame. And I looked around, and for one reason or another, I was either the on-call supervisor during those times, but it was the same crew that kept showing up. Out of 20 plus officers in your office, it was the same 6 people that
Mhm.
for some reason kept getting called back to these fatality scenes. And it dawned on me about the fourth or fifth fatality that we really hadn't debriefed any of them.
Yeah.
And I could start to see the effects with our people. So we called in some wellness resources. We sat in a circle and we talked about everything that was bothering us, on those scenes. And it was really beneficial to let those guys um, talk about that. And I went ahead and started out. So there I was as the senior most officer in the room, the highest ranking individual. And I just kind of started with the person that was running the wellness scenario for us. And once I opened up just a little bit, everybody else in that room, even those that you thought would, just started opening up, and
Yeah.
super beneficial. Um, And I wish more people would just kind of show that, because sometimes that stoic attitude and that macho-ness, you're not doing any of those younger folks that you're trying to mentor a favor by just burying those emotions.
Yeah.
You got to share those moments.
I honestly think that one of my biggest flex, I'll say this, maybe like the younger kids will understand the lingo, but like my biggest flex is being able to like overcome the things that I had been through in my life and to grow and be a better person and then to be able to help other people because of that. I think that is such a huge superpower for anyone to have. And I think my question when you were talking is like, what is the cost of not dealing with it? What is the cost of not prioritizing your wellness? And obviously, I understand. I've had enough conversations, throughout my career where I understand the culture and how it used to be. I understand how you were brought up in this profession and the pressure to rub dirt on it. And that was a part of the job, right? It was like, keep going, kid, like pick yourself up and keep going. And the fear of losing your job and not, being fit for duty. I completely understand that mentality. With that being said, I think that there's now an entirely different message that is being put out there by leaders like yourself who are saying, hey, like, we're not going to operate how it used to be. If you're not okay and you need to talk to someone, we're not going to take your gun and your badge. Like, we're going to make sure that you get the support that you need because that's a normal response to something terrible that you just went through, whatever that critical incident was, or maybe it's just accumulation of stress over time and you just need to offload it.
Mhm.
And so I think the question again is what is the cost of doing it, of reaching for help, and what is the cost of not doing it? And I think the cost of maybe for a lot of people of asking for help is maybe pride or like feeling a certain way or feeling that there's going to be judgment, but the cost of not doing it far outweighs that, right? And so it's what does that do to you, your family, your performance, your longevity? And so I think maybe anyone who's listening, you can think that like what is the cost of not dealing with the things that you need to and not being physically, mentally, emotionally well.
Yeah, and I think anybody that's been in, a first responder role, military role for a long time, you know what the answer is to that. And you've seen people get to the end of their career and they retire, and then 5 years later, they're dead.
Yep.
And then you've seen the people that got to that 20-year mark or 20, up almost to retirement, and something significant happens, whether it's a health related problem, probably due to stress
Mm.
or suicide, or they took to the bottle, took to the pills, and ended their career
Yeah.
because they could not cope. And so you have the answer. That is the downside of not dealing with all the buildup that you can possibly get throughout your career.
Yeah.
So I would say, but we may know those people, but I would say that you probably know somebody that dealt with their emotions and the trauma very well and got to retire and got to enjoy life after that. Maybe moved on to second career and
Mhm.
did very well. They stayed busy, they stayed engaged. Um, but those are probably those people with that positive mindset, and they train themselves to deal with all that trauma
Yeah.
so that they get to their end goals. And having those goals is, I think, key to that positive mindset,
I agree.
right? Setting a physical goal for yourself, whether it's, hey, I'm going to do a 5K this weekend or next month, um, anything, find something.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I have a lot of conversations where I will ask people like, why is it important for you to be well? And everyone's gonna have different reasons, but at the core, it's all related to longevity. Every person I talk to, like it might be like, oh, like I just wanna, rise through the ranks and be really successful and, and become chief one day. Like, okay, well, you have to have longevity in the career to be able to do that, right? Or like, oh, I want to be here for as long as possible for my kids. I want to be there with my grandkids. That's longevity. I want to retire and I want to have a, as long, I want my retirement to be as long as my career. That's longevity, So I think that at the core, that's what everyone wants. Everyone wants to feel as good as possible for as long as possible. And so what are the steps? If you can, if you can identify that, like you said, that goal, then you can work backwards and say, okay, what are the steps that I can do today to set myself up for that? And one of the things, and you mentioned this, you kind of alluded to this earlier, but I'd like to see your perspective. I've heard that, you see these younger officers coming into this career and they're like so excited. They have that positive mindset. They're like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. They're like, yes, like here we go. And then there's, you know, I know you said 8-year mark is kind of like that burnout rate mark, but from what I understand, it's maybe like more like 3 years in, like 3 to 5, where you start to kind of see them become a little bit more jaded. And maybe it's because of the job, or maybe it's because of peer influence. How do you support the younger guys and girls who are coming into this profession and try to maintain that excitement for the career without them getting influenced by maybe some of the negativity?
Yeah, that's a hard one. And I try to remind them that this career is a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah.
And every one of us come in at a sprint, and I went in at a sprint myself. And then I heard all the old timers telling me that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's tough because, you know, most of us just don't listen because we're super type A and we're like, no, we're going to show you, we're going to change the world, we're going to do all this. Um, my advice to that younger crowd is listen to those guys because they were there, they've been there, they've done that, and it's okay to slow down once in a while and just take a step back and look at things, try to figure out where you want to go, and try to play that longevity game and
Yeah.
figure out, okay, this is where I want to be someday. What steps can I take now uh, to make myself more valuable for that next promotion, that next, transfer to criminal or another division? Um, but it's a hard one because I think most of us just choose not to listen at that. So you kind of have to just kind of laugh it off because you were there. You were there that day.
I think about that a lot. I'm like, man, like I wish I would have known what I knew now when I was younger, but I
Uh-huh.
also know that my younger self wouldn't have listened and like would have just done whatever, because I was that way too. Like I was like, no one can tell me anything. I know everything that there is to know
Mhm.
about everything. And the reality was I didn't know. There's like an expression I won't say online, but I didn't know anything at
Mhm.
all. I'm curious what advice you would have maybe for the older guys and girls and how they can help support the younger generation or help support each other so that they're not rubbing off some of their negativity and they're being a positive influence.
Yeah, we've got to remember that we were there once,
Mhm.
right? What we tend to forget that we were there once as well. Um, but also, steal their energy.
Mhm.
It's refreshing sometimes when you get a new batch of people with new blood, and you'll see it in your larger agencies when you get an influx of new people. All of a sudden, they start going out and they start working really hard, and all of a sudden, you'll see your guys that are you know 10 years from retirement. They start picking up the pace because they don't want these young folks showing them up, right? So it sparks some friendly competition,
Yep.
which is good to watch. But also for those old, the old timers in the crew, share your stories. A lot of times we share the stories that this happened to me at work story. Well, those. that's going to come every day. Don't be afraid to share your life stories,
Mm,
because those are the ones I think that they really need to hear, um, so that they don't have two or three ex-spouses by the time they get there. Share those stories in the things they learned along the way. Um, Sometimes it's not a good idea to go buy a brand new truck that you're not going to have time to drive anyways because you work too much, or a boat, or whatever other toy. I know far too many people in our line of work that go out and buy that brand new toy, but they don't have time to use it.
mm,
Um, I have this conversation with my kid all the time. He's like, "Why don't you buy a boat?" It's like, "Well, it would just sit in the driveway. I'd be making monthly payments, and I don't have time for a boat right now in my life. So maybe when I actually retire, I'll think about getting a boat because I'll have time to use it and enjoy it."
mm.
So, share those life stories, would be my advice for the older crew in the office.
Yeah,
Share all your life stories so that they can learn from them.
I really like that a lot. And there's a couple things like I think that positivity is really infectious. I also think negativity is really infectious. And so, how can you promote more positivity, within the organization and try to keep that momentum going? Because to your point, there's enough negative things in the world. How can within your community, within your team, within your life, how can you counteract that by really putting forth the effort to try to cultivate an environment of positivity? And again, this is going to go back to like, if you would have told me when I was 20, I probably wouldn't listen, but I now, in the seasoned era of my life, really appreciate delayed gratification. I think that it is so much sweeter to like wait and like work hard and like wait until you're in a position where like you're really stable and ready for whatever that is, for you to then get it instead of like the impulsivity of like buying something you can't afford. And so to me, like that sounds like a great goal if when you're ready to retire, you finally get the boat and now you're out on the lake fishing every day. Like that sounds way better than the stress of it sitting in your driveway and now you have to work overtime because you can't afford it and now you're away from your family and now your relationship is broken and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think having a little bit of that like delayed gratification if you can, so that you make sure that you can afford something or that you're prepared for whatever it is.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm an impulsive person. Like if I had the chance, I would have a puppy right now, and I don't have the time for a puppy, so I'm waiting. Delayed gratification. I have one final question for you, and I know you've already shared a lot of really, really great advice, and I appreciate that. In the context of wellness, what words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier, or something that's helped you along the way.
pay attention. Because all of our disciplines, that they train us to handle these daily situations, these tactical scenarios constantly, but we're still behind the eight ball when it comes to handling the emotional aftermath.
Mhm.
So having those debriefs, having talking about those incidents, with a friend, one, try to find people that you can be friends with that are not in your same discipline, because it's super easy to um, surround yourself with a bunch of firefighters or a bunch of cops or a bunch of our medics. Um, Military is the same way. We surround ourselves with those like-minded individuals. It helps so much. They're all good friends and they always will be, but try to find friends outside of that line of work so that when you go have dinner with them or barbecue, whatever, you definitely don't have to talk about work.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's been beneficial for me in my world. Just a couple of years ago, my wife, well, it's been 5 or 6 years ago, my kid was a club swimmer. And that's a voluntary organization, and it's through USA Swimming. They recruited us to be officials, and So I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years now. And that's, basically it's volunteer work. You're helping the kids, you're officiating their swim meets, but most of the people in that are just from every walk of life. And you end up making friends outside of your world. And I think that's super healthy to get out of that world and kind of get back into uh, normal society, if you will. I think that's something I would encourage people to do is to find something outside of law enforcement so they can truly get a break away from that. I think that's been super helpful for me in my last 6 to 7 years of my career.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing and I appreciate you coming on here and talking about wellness. And that's all I have for you. But if there's anything I missed, let me know. But I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Of course. And thank you to everyone who's still listening. We appreciate your time and we'll see you again next time.